The Atlanta Falcons finished the 2024 season with an 8-9 record and missed the playoffs for the 7th straight year.
When this is what the result is, nobody's happy about that. We understand at this point the words don't mean anything. We have to speak with our results, and that's what we're going to do.
Outside of a few moments like the game-winning drive against the Eagles or both of the Bucs games, it was a very frustrating year for Atlanta. They signed Kirk Cousins to a large contract in March of 2024 in hopes he would help this team stabilize the quarterback position and get back to the postseason. It was a very weird year from the start for Atlanta because there was always going to be the background noise of a first-round quarterback sitting behind a 36-year-old quarterback coming off of a torn Achilles.
I love Michael Penix as a prospect. You just mentioned it, though. You got other holes you need to fill, and you draft another quarterback. You're just going to sit him for 2 years?
But for a little bit, it looked like Atlanta was going to go to the playoffs. There was a point where the Falcons were 6-3 and Kirk had 17 touchdowns to 7 interceptions. But things unraveled, and quickly, as after the win against Dallas, Kirk Cousins had the worst 5-game stretch of his career, as he had just 1 passing touchdown and 9 interceptions, and the Falcons were 1-4 with the lone win coming over the Raiders on a Monday night game during this span.
You know, he wants to play better, he's got to play better, we got to find a way to get him to play better.
After the Raiders game, Kirk Cousins was benched and the Michael Penix era officially began. But really, outside of discussing the future of Kirk Cousins, and the big reaction from trading a 2026 first to go up and get James Pierce near the end of round 1, and the occasional mention of any of Bijan Robinson, Drake London, or everybody's favorite, Kyle Pitts, there hasn't been a whole lot talked about regarding the 2025 Falcons. So what should we actually expect from the Atlanta Falcons this year? Well, we're going to break everything down in today's video. Now let's begin. And we are starting today's video by discussing who the Falcons brought in and who they lost this offseason. If you have paid any attention to the Falcons defense over the past, well, really 10 years, then you know they need help at one position in particular, and that of course is pass rush. They brought in Leonard Floyd from the 49ers this offseason, who is coming off of a year in which he had 44 pressures and 8.5 sacks. Floyd has had 44 or more pressures in every year since 2020, and it is definitely worth noting he will play this season at 33 years old, but the biggest thing for Atlanta here is they are trying to upgrade their pass rush, and they also attempted this in a big way in the 2025 draft, and we'll get to that in a minute, but the biggest thing they had to do this offseason was raise their floor. It was frustrating to watch this defense at times because there were times where they couldn't get off the field. They finished 28th in defensive EPA and 29th in defensive DVOA, and also finished 23rd in points allowed. So they also brought in Divine Diablo from the Raiders, they brought back veteran corner Mike Hughes and veteran defensive lineman Taquan Graham, as well as veteran defensive lineman Morgan Fox. You may have noticed one thing through that, and it's that they really didn't address the offensive side of the football this offseason. This team legitimately believes they're good entering 2025 on the offensive side of the football, and technically addressed the offense, of course, as they brought back several players like guard Kyle Hinton, wide receiver Kadero Hodge, and utility offensive lineman Storm Norton too. Now, the Falcons lost a few players in free agency, and they were in a weird situation financially because of Kirk Cousins' contract. Per Spotrac.com, they only have $7.8 million in dead cap money on the books in 2025, which is 29th in the NFL, and obviously that's very good. But this is a unique situation because their slated backup quarterback has a cap hit of $40 million for the 2025 season, which accounts for about 14.3% of their salary cap this year. The guarantees within Kirk's contract make this a little more complicated because if they flat out released him, his cap hit for this year would be a lot higher than what it currently is for Atlanta in 2025. But for the sake of this, if you add $40 million to the $7.8 million they have in dead cap money, well, Atlanta would jump from 29th in the NFL in dead cap money to 11th with $47.8 million in dead cap money. So inevitably, that limited what they were going to be able to do, and they had to move on from longtime defensive tackle Grady Jarrett. Now, Grady Jarrett is not a bad player in 2025, but the biggest thing is he's not who he once was. He's on the wrong side of 30, and he certainly plays like it at times, and playing over 7,000 snaps in the NFL has taken a toll. They also lost Drew Dahlman in free agency, a center, and he is being replaced by former UDFA Ryan Newsel. Dalman played at a high level for Atlanta over the past few years, and that's certainly not going to be an easy hole to fill, but they didn't really lose too much in free agency either. Justin Simmons and Matt Judon are players they're going to have to replace, at least from a snap count standpoint, as Simmons played over 1,000 snaps last year and Judon played over 650, but there's a reason both of these guys are still free agents, and especially Judon. That says a lot about where he is as a player, especially in a league that can never have enough pass rush. They also technically lost Rondale Moore, who signed with the Vikings this offseason, as Rondale was traded in a rare player-for-player trade with Desmond Ridder, but Rondale Moore suffered a season-ending injury in training camp last year and never actually played for the Falcons. So aside from having to replace Grady Jarrett and the snap counts from Justin Simmons and Matt Judon, as well as Drew Dalman, this team didn't lose much from 2024 to 2025. Now, for the 2025 Falcons defense, the biggest thing that needs to be remembered about this unit is Rome was not built in a day, and I do like Raheem Morris as a defensive coach, and I also like Jeff Ulbrich as a defensive coordinator, and I am eager to see how they work together to build the defense this year. One thing that really hindered the Falcons last year was, of course, the pass rush, or lack of. And whenever you cannot consistently get after the quarterback, the way Atlanta couldn't last year, well, that's obviously going to limit what you're going to be able to do. This may be a surprise to some people, but Atlanta's defense didn't allow as many explosive plays as you'd think. They actually allowed the 6th fewest 20-plus yard passing plays in 2024, and what happened was, a lot of the time, opposing quarterbacks would get comfortable in the pocket and more or less pick apart the defense. Atlanta didn't call as much man coverage in 24 as they did in 23, and because of offenses not taking the top off Atlanta's defense, this culminated in Atlanta ranking 26th in average time of possession per drive defensively. And like we said, Atlanta addressed the pass rush this offseason by bringing in guys like James Pierce, Leonard Floyd, and Jalen Walker, who I do believe will be a Swiss Army knife in the defense and not in one specific role. And the reason I brought up Rome was not built in today with this defense is I don't think this unit is the most talented in the NFL, not even close. So inevitably, I think there will be some limitations as to what they can do defensively in 2025, but the biggest thing is there has to be improvement from where they were last year. For reference, they finished 28th in EPA per play and 29th in defensive DVOA in 2024. And I know this isn't entirely on Raheem Morris, obviously, but if they don't improve this year and the Falcons miss the playoffs again, then there's going to be rumblings about his job, especially since he is a defensive coach with a quarterback on a rookie contract. But one player I do expect to improve from last year to this year, both from a schematic perspective as well as benefiting from the pass rush, is AJ Terrell. Terrell had a great second season back in 2021 and has had an up and down few years since, but I still believe in the player and think the blended scheme between a cover 3 match and quarters defense will largely benefit Terrell. Jesse Bates, of course, has made the most out of a not great situation over the past few years, but with the defense intending to play more aggressive this year, it's going to require a lot of communication on the back end, and I do think that could hurt the Falcons in the long run and be more susceptible to giving up big plays, because I don't think this team has a legitimate franchise pass rusher, at least not at this point in time. Now, I know the 2025 Falcons are a true wild card, and obviously that applies to their offense, especially with who's under center, given his limited NFL experience, but I also think that applies to the defense too. Because of the youth this team has, along with a new DC and a new philosophy defensively, I think the Falcons defense has one of the highest variances of outcomes of any team in the NFL this year. If all of the pass rushers develop and buy in with Jeff Ulbrich and maximize what they can do, along with how good Atlanta is at running the football offensively, then this will be a very difficult team to play. But where I have a lot of concern with this team and why I think the outcome for this defense varies significantly is the corners behind AJ Terrell, as well as the interior defensive line, and especially the interior defensive line. I'm not sold on David Onyemata at this point in his career, and I was never a fan of the Rook or Rowe selection, and when the weak point of your defense is right in the middle of the field, well, that's an easy way to attack this team. I think there will be very fun weeks with the Falcons defense this year, and weeks where, dare I say, the pass rush, and more specifically edge rushers, win consistently and have great games, but I also think there's going to be multiple games where the corner play lets them down, and you really see a couple of lapses in communication that result in big plays allowed. And ultimately, I think this team finishes in the 20 to 26 range of NFL defenses this year. The Atlanta Falcons had 5 draft picks in the 2025 draft, and they had 4 in the top 118, with 1 in the 7th round at pick 218 in offensive tackle Jack Nelson. We're obviously going to refer mostly to the top 4 here, and I respectfully hope Jack Nelson doesn't have to play for the Falcons in 2025, because you can obviously infer what that would mean if he does have to play meaningful snaps. Now, they started with the selection of defensive player Jalen Walker from Georgia, and the reason that we refer to him as a defensive player is because he's going to play linebacker as well as rush the passer quite a bit in 2025. My biggest concern with Jalen Walker as a draft prospect was that a team was going to try to make him primarily an edge rusher at 6'1", 245 pounds, and kind of refer to him as a mini Micah Parsons, or kind of try to use him as a mini Micah Parsons, and I thought that would be setting Jalen Walker up for failure. Now, if Jalen Walker is both a hybrid of a linebacker and an edge, where he's going to have designated pass rushing snaps on 3rd and 8+ and get after the quarterback with James Pierce Jr. and of course Leonard Floyd, who they picked up in free agency, by all means, I absolutely love that role for him, but that was my biggest concern with Jalen Walker in the pre-draft process. I trust Raheem Morris and I trust Jeff Ulbrich with their role for him, and I really can't wait to see him play in 2025, and the same also applies to James Pierce Jr. Now, I will be honest, while James Pierce Jr. upgrades this defense, obviously, as pretty much any pass rushing prospect in the first round would have upgraded this defense, I don't want to sit here a couple of months later and act like I was in love with the trade that the Falcons gave up to go get James Pierce. They gave up pick 46 as well as a 2026 first, and I thought that was a borderline desperate move by Terry Fontenot, because if the Falcons do not perform to the high levels this year that they're expected to, at least from ownership, then there's a chance that Terry Fontenot doesn't make that selection to begin with. So I thought it was kind of, hey, last gasp, let's go up and get a pass rusher, and if it doesn't work out, then I'm not making this selection anyway. And you can go back a couple of months to the draft reaction videos and see exactly how I felt about that trade when it happened. This was a team that frustrated me on night 1 because of the trade value. And I at least wanted to kind of, stand my ground on that specific take. But what I will say is I hope James Pierce proves me wrong, and I hope he is well worth the 26th pick in the 2025 draft. And as a player going into this defense, disregarding the trade to acquire him, just James Pierce, the player himself, I really like him in this defense and really like the idea of him, Leonard Floyd, and Jalen Walker all getting after the quarterback on 3rd down when it matters most. One of the reasons I was a little lower on James Pierce Jr. than other first-round pass rushing prospects was because I thought he won a lot on athleticism, and I didn't think there was refined technical hand usage the way that you see from other first-round picks. Now, not that that can't be developed at the NFL level, I just think at times whenever you have an athlete like James Pierce, at least with how he played on the field, that it's kind of assumed, well, he's already a great athlete, so he'll just get NFL coaching and he'll be good, and all of a sudden he'll go from this player at the collegiate level to an all-pro at the NFL level because he's going to receive NFL level coaching, and that he's going to develop, and it's going to happen at the snap of a finger and be an overnight fix. A lot of the time that's not the case, and again, not to say that James Pierce is not coachable or that he simply can't work at his craft and become a good NFL player. That's just kind of why I was a little lower on him than other NFL media analysts. But whenever you bring in Jalen Walker and James Pierce and upgrade the Falcons defense from last year to this year, you are naturally going to have a lot of rookie impact from those 2 players alone. The Falcons also drafted a safety from Notre Dame in Xavier Watts, a player who I had at 59 on my big board that they selected at 96, and Oklahoma's Billy Bowman. And for the players the Falcons acquired with the first 4 selections in Jalen Walker, James Pierce, Xavier Watts, and Billy Bowman, I really like those players individually. And again, if you kind of factor out the trade itself to go get James Pierce, which again could prove to be good in the long run, then I really like this class for the players that they acquired. I just didn't, again, like the trade to give up a future first and to only move up 20 spots, as well as giving up a 2nd round pick in the process. You get the point. But for the players the Falcons individually acquired, they should have pretty substantial rookie impact, and that doesn't apply to just the 1st round picks. I think there's a really good chance that Xavier Watts unseats Jordan Fuller from the starting safety position at this point in time, and by year's end he could very easily start 6 or 7 games and be a legitimate contributor next to Jesse Bates. I think Xavier Watts is a very high IQ football player, and a player that a lot of the time is in the right place at the right time. And whenever you have high IQ players that, again, are at the right place at the right time, you're going to win a lot of games because they are generally around the football and they are generally making plays when it matters most. So for the players the Falcons acquired this year, I think they should have pretty substantial rookie impact, and dare we say it, a pass rush that can legitimately get after the quarterback in 2025. This should be a foundation to build on in 2026 and beyond. The 2025 Falcons offense discussion will obviously start around second-year quarterback Michael Penix, and whenever I went back and watched his tape for what was probably the fourth or fifth time this summer, I think one of the biggest things that need to be remembered regarding Penix's rookie numbers and rookie tape is context is key. Whenever Penix finally got out there, what needs to be remembered is he was not taking first-team reps for most of the 2024 season. Zach Robinson and Raheem Morris were not going to say to Darnell Mooney, Drake London, and Kyle Pitts, and Bijan Robinson, it actually came out in a video recently that Bijan Robinson's name is pronounced Bijan. That was per Bijan Robinson himself.
How you pronounce my name is Bijan. For everybody that's out there.
But they were not going to say that, hey, you know what you guys need to do? We just had an hour and a half, 2-hour practice. You guys need to stay out another hour, hour and a half to help Michael Penix progress. That was not their job, and now that will be their job in 2025, but they were not going to do that so that every single player would be fatigued come Sunday. That's just not how it was ever going to work. So whenever you have that context within that, and whenever you have the context around Michael Penix still showing flashes within his rookie season, guys, I'm reasonably bought in with Michael Penix. And there's a couple of plays that I really want to highlight to show why I'm bought in with Michael Penix entering 2025. The first was his first throw in his NFL starting debut. It was against the Giants, and Michael Penix gets absolutely drilled by Kayvon Thibodeau on a comeback route thrown to Ray McCloud. Now, Ray McCloud was running the comeback, and whenever we talk about guys doing the little things right, and that's what separates players like Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase from Ray McCloud, whenever you hear the little things right, well, what exactly does that mean aside from just saying the little things right to try and sound smart in a football discussion? Well, what I mean by that is Ray gets to the top of his comeback route, starts to come back, and instead of really coming back to the football and attacking the football that you would see Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson do on tape, Ray waits for the football in a very passive way for the ball to come to him, and credit to Deonte Banks for playing really good coverage here, and he breaks up the play. Now, I have been critical of Deonte Banks in the channel in the past, mostly from an effort standpoint, but that was nowhere to be seen here. This was a great play by Deonte Banks. It was a high-effort play, and it was good on him to go attack the football and to make a play. Now, Michael Penix threw 3 interceptions in his rookie season, and if you were a Falcons fan, then you definitely remember 2 of the 3 interceptions were not his fault. One came in the Giants game. It was when the Falcons were in the red zone. He placed a ball at Kyle Pitts' hands, hit him directly in the hands. It wasn't a play where Kyle Pitts had to really extend to go up and get the football while getting drilled in the process. In fact, it was the exact opposite of that. Kyle Pitts had the ball in his hand and was turning to make a play to go towards the end zone, and he got hit in a very Looney Tunes style way. The ball popped right up, and it was an interception going the other way. Now, if Kyle Pitts makes the play and he has a 4th passing touchdown to just 2 interceptions, I don't think the outlook for Penix is going to look all that different, but I do think a 4-2 TD to INT ratio in limited time looks substantially different than a 3-3 TD to INT ratio. And the same concept applies to an interception that he had against the Panthers in Week 18, where this interception was definitely not Michael Penix's fault, as he placed the ball directly in his receiver's hands, dropped the football, bounces right up, and boom, another interception for Michael Penix. There was another great throw by Michael Penix against Washington in what was his second career start, where Atlanta was running a trips right dagger call to Washington's Tampa 2, and for Penix to throw this ball to the seam route down the middle of the field, right in between the window of where Bobby Wagner's tadpole was and in between Jeremy Chinn coming over to defend this pass, was a hell of a throw in a tight window. And Jeremy Chinn did not have an assignment on the play because the receiver on the backside was running an underneath route, so this technically was a hospital ball, but for Penix to be able to fit this ball in a tight window in his second career start in a year where he didn't have a lot of chemistry with guys because he was practicing with the second team for most of the year, to me shows that there's a lot of potential there in 2025 and beyond. And again, I'm not focusing on the decision making here. I am focusing strictly on his ability to fit a football in a tight window, which Michael Penix did regularly at Washington, and he also did a lot of that during the Week 18 game against Carolina. Now, I don't want this to come across like Michael Penix is going to be a perfect player in 2025, because he's not. And from a stat sheet perspective, I think he'll be around 4,000 to 4,200 yards, along with 26 to 27 passing touchdowns this year, and with 12 to 13 interceptions. Because the reality with Penix last year is, for as much as I liked the tape, there were still some weaknesses. There were times where he flat out missed throws, and I don't have an explanation as to why he would miss those throws, because he would be clean in the pocket, his foundation would be set, and he'd go to make the throw, and there were a couple of plays like on a deep over to Drake London, for example, where he would flat out miss the throw, and this could have been a completion of 20 or 30 yards, but Penix overthrew him by 4 or 5 yards. Now, if there is any positive to that, or at least somewhat of a positive spin, whenever Penix would miss these types of throws, for whatever reason, there was not a DB behind him, and it was really weird because Penix would have these weird misses that every NFL quarterback should make, but weirdly enough, whenever Penix would have these missed throws, nobody was behind him. It was like something got in his head to where, hey, there's nobody there, I have to make this, and it's kind of like when you think about it when you're shooting a jump shot in basketball where you think about it for an extra second, but whenever there were DBs behind the receivers and whenever they're playing a cover 2 or cover 3 or whatever, Penix wouldn't miss the throws as open as he did whenever they were running a cover 1 and there was simply nobody behind a receiver on a deep over or behind a running back in a man-to-man concept from the linebacker. So I don't have a reason as to why Penix missed some of the throws that he did last year, but I am reasonably bought in with him in 2025, and if I had to give the ultimatum of whether or not the Falcons have a franchise quarterback entering this year, I think they do. The Falcons finished 4th in rushing DVOA last year, and I really hope that continues in 2025 because obviously when you have a young quarterback, or any quarterback for that matter, a run game is a quarterback's best friend, and the Falcons are returning 4 of 5 offensive linemen from last year, and Bijan Robinson is one of the best running backs in football, as he had over 1,800 total yards and 15 total touchdowns last year. Now, as simple as this idea is, with how talented Bijan Robinson is, as well as the Falcons' offensive line, and given that they are in year 2 under Zach Robinson, meaning continuity within the offense, just run it back. They should be a top 10 rushing offense this year, and the goal should be to help out Michael Penix as much as you possibly can. That also applies to Tyler Algier, who I do believe is an underrated second running back, and while he's obviously nowhere near as talented as the guy in front of him, he still has a role within the offense, and I do believe that Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier are one of the more underappreciated running back duos in all of football. The receiving room is, of course, led by Drake London, who had over 1,200 yards last year, and I'll keep this short and sweet with Drake London. I think the success should be continued as he wins routes in several ways, and he is a really, really good football player, and as long as he stays healthy, there's no reason to think that his success won't continue. He should be over 1,000 yards with relative ease, again, barring health, and I also really like Darnell Mooney as this team's wide receiver, too. Mooney finished the 24 season with 992 receiving yards, and it was good to see him have a resurgence year after a couple of down years in Chicago. Now, the big wild card in the room is tight end Kyle Pitts, who is entering year 5. Kyle Pitts is coming off of back-to-back 600-yard seasons, and he finished 10th amongst tight ends in receiving yards in 23 and 13th amongst tight ends in receiving yards in 2024, and that's about where I think he should be. Now, I don't think he's going to be a 1,000-yard tight end in 2025, although I do think it is worth noting he is just 24 years old and will turn 25 in October, so he's still a relatively young player, all things considered, and there's a lot of potential there with Pitts, but for a stat projection for Kyle Pitts, I think will be around 650 yards, along with 5 or 6 receiving touchdowns this year. The Atlanta Falcons are a true wildcard entering 2025, and as long as the offense can produce to the level that I think, there's absolutely no reason that they can't make the playoffs this year. Ultimately, I think the defense will hold this team up, but I do think the Falcons will be one of the most fun teams to watch in 2025. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, as I cannot thank you guys enough for the support, and we are closing in at 200,000 subscribers. Until next time, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.